My name is Ramon, and what I'm going to tell you happened a while ago when I worked as a street vendor in La Lagunilla, where I had a clothing stand. This is one of the most emblematic markets in Mexico City. That stage of my life was complicated, but also in some way exciting. The market was a place full of life, with voices mingling and the aroma of street food, as well as the constant activity of buyers looking for everything from antiques to used clothing. However, what happened to me this time scared me quite a bit. I clearly remember the day I saw the mirror for the first time. It was a Sunday morning, the busiest day at the market. I was looking for some decorations for my clothing stand. Although I didn't sell luxury products, I wanted to give it a special touch to attract more customers. As I walked through the narrow aisles and stalls full of items, a flash caught my attention. It was a tall mirror with a carved wooden frame that seemed to have been gilded at some point. The surface of the mirror was slightly opaque, but still clear enough to reflect. It was an imposing piece, much more elegant than I expected to find in a market like this. "How much for the mirror?" I asked. The seller, an older man with a tired countenance, looked at me for a moment before answering. 300 pesos, young man. It's old, but it's a fine piece." Back then, that was a lot of money. It was no small thing. I hesitated, thinking I might be overspending, but something told me I should take the mirror. After haggling a bit, we managed to close the deal at 250 pesos. I carried it to my stand, where I placed it against one of the improvised walls of my little shop. At first, the mirror was a success. It attracted the attention of customers. Often, they would stay longer at my stand, trying on clothes and admiring themselves. For a few weeks, my sales increased considerably. However, it didn't take long for me to notice that something was not quite right. One afternoon, while I was organizing clothes, I realized that the mirror reflected something strange. There seemed to be movement in the background, as if something had passed quickly behind me. I turned around, but there was no one. I thought it was just my imagination, so I ignored it. But the incidents continued. Sometimes when I closed the stall and looked in the mirror, I would see shadows that made no sense. Once, I could have sworn I saw a face that was not mine. It was fleeting, just a blink, but enough to make me doubt my sanity. I was not the only one who noticed strange things about the mirror. Some customers also began to mention odd occurrences. "Hey, sir, your mirror is strange," a woman once told me while trying something on. I felt like it was looking at me. Another customer assured me that the reflection did not match reality. She said that in the mirror, she was wearing a red dress, but in reality, she was trying on a blue one. The only thing I told her was that it was an old mirror and that maybe the light sometimes made things look strange. However, I could not ignore that more and more people mentioned similar things. The idea that the mirror had something strange about it began to disturb me. One night, I had a dream that left me deeply unsettled. In the dream, I was alone in my market stall and everything was dark except for the mirror's reflection, which shone with a dim light. I approached to look at myself, but the reflection was not mine. It belonged to a woman. She had long, dark hair and was staring at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. When I woke up, the dream seemed so real to me that it was hard to go back to sleep. I didn't tell anyone, but from that moment on, I began to feel a strange connection with the mirror, as if it were always present, even when I wasn't at the market. On Saturday afternoon, a peculiar-looking man came to my stall. He was dressed simply, but there was something in his gaze that made me nervous. He looked at the mirror for a few minutes before speaking. "Hey, where did you get this?" he asked, pointing at the mirror. "I bought it right here at the market," I answered, trying to sound casual. "You should get rid of it," he said seriously. "That mirror has a story." "What kind of story?" I asked, but the man simply stared at me for a moment before walking away. He didn't say another word, leaving me with a lingering sense of doubt. That night, I couldn't sleep, replaying his words over and over in my mind. Was he just trying to scare me, or did he know something I didn't? The uncertainty gnawed at me, so I decided to investigate. The next day, I went back to the seller who had sold me the mirror. He simply shrugged. It was from an old house in the city center. They brought it to me when they were cleaning out the place. "Cleaning out after a death?" I asked, feeling a sudden chill. The seller nodded. "Yeah, something like that. The house belonged to a woman who lived alone. They found her dead under strange circumstances. I tried to brush it off as a coincidence, but deep down, I couldn't shake the unease that had settled in my chest. Ever since that mirror had come into my life, strange things had been happening. The following days were filled with a constant sense of restlessness. Although I tried to continue with my routine at the market, I couldn't help but feel that something dark had taken root in my life. The mirror, which had once been an attraction for my business, was beginning to feel like a curse. One afternoon, while I was organizing clothes in my stall, one of my regular customers, Doña Estela, came by to try on a dress. As she adjusted the garment in front of the mirror, her expression suddenly changed. Her face turned pale and she dropped the dress on the floor. "Is everything okay, Doña Estela?" I asked, alarmed. She placed a trembling hand on her chest and kept staring at the mirror. "No, I don't know. I thought I saw someone behind me, but when I turned around, there was no one there." I tried to reassure her, saying it was probably just a trick of the light, but her discomfort was evident. She left hurriedly without buying anything, something completely out of the ordinary for her. That same night, as I was closing up my stall, I decided to take a long, careful look at the mirror. I stood in front of it for several minutes, searching for any imperfection or explanation for the strange incidents, but the only thing staring back at me was my own reflection. And yet, something felt off. My gaze reflected something that didn't seem entirely mine, as if I were looking at a version of myself that wasn't truly me. The next day, I shared my concerns with Don Jacinto, an older merchant who had been working in the market for years. He was well known for selling antiques. "That mirror has something strange, Don Jacinto. People say it, and I've felt it too," I told him. Don Jacinto frowned and stroked his beard. "Look, Ramon, I'm not the kind of man who believes in just anything, but I'll tell you something I've learned in all these years selling antiques. Sometimes objects carry the history of those who owned them. If that mirror comes from a house where tragedy happened, it's possible that the tragedy hasn't fully left." "And what can I do?" I asked, feeling a lump in my throat. "First of all, don't let fear control you, but if you want peace of mind, you could look for someone who knows about these things. There's a woman at the Sonora market. People say she understands energies and such things." I appreciated his advice, though the idea of seeking spiritual help seemed excessive. However, something in his words stuck with me. That night, the dream returned. I saw the woman in the mirror again, but this time the vision was much clearer. I was in a dark room with walls covered in shifting shadows. In the center, she stood, the dark-haired woman. She was staring at me with an expression that was a mixture of sadness and anger. "Help me," she whispered, her voice filling the entire room. I tried to speak, but I couldn't make a sound. Suddenly, she stepped closer, and her eyes, black as the night, locked onto mine. A whirlwind of distorted images surrounded me, and I woke up, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding like a drum. Her voice still echoed in my head. The next day, I decided to go to the Sonora market. I had heard about it many times. People said you could find everything there, from medicinal herbs to healers. Although I remained skeptical, I needed answers. When I arrived, the atmosphere was completely different from La Lagunilla. There was an air of mystery mixed with the scent of incense and herbs. After asking around, I found the stall of a woman named Doña Rosario. "Come in, young man," she said with a kind but enigmatic smile. "What brings you here? Do you need a cleansing?" I told her everything about the mirror, the dreams, the comments from my customers. She listened intently. "That mirror is charged, young man. Someone, something, is still tied to it." "Can you help me?" I asked, a mix of hope and fear in my voice. "I can try, but I need to see the mirror in person to understand what we're dealing with." The idea of carrying the mirror there made me uneasy, but something in her tone convinced me it was the only way to find out the truth. That night I had another dream. But this time, it wasn't just the woman in the mirror. There was something else. A massive, deformed shadow loomed behind her, watching us from the darkness. When I woke up, I knew there was no turning back. Something was tied to that mirror, and I had to uncover what it was. The next morning, I loaded the mirror onto my old cart and headed to the Sonora market. The journey was slow and tense. Every time I glanced at my truck's rearview mirror, I felt like something inside the mirror was moving. I tried to tell myself it was just my nerves, but the discomfort never left. When I arrived, Doña Rosario's expression darkened the moment she saw the mirror. She ran her hands along the frame and muttered, "This mirror has a heavy energy. It's not just an object tied to a spirit. It's a portal." Her words sent a chill down my spine. She took out white candles, a bundle of herbs, and a container of black salt. We moved to the back of her stall, where she arranged the candles around the mirror and began chanting. As the ritual progressed, the air grew dense and the temperature dropped. Then suddenly, one of the candles went out on its own. Doña Rosario stopped chanting and studied the mirror carefully. "Whatever is here does not want to leave," she whispered. "I need help." She called in other healers, and together they repeated the ritual. Though I kept a safe distance, I felt the energy shifting, as if something was resisting. Then, at the climax of the ritual, Doña Rosario shouted and threw the black salt at the mirror. The mirror trembled, and then it shattered. She picked up the pieces carefully. "It's over. The good thing is that you didn't break it yourself. Otherwise, it would have been worse for you." Afterward, she cleansed me with herbs and incense. I don't know if it was real or psychological, but I felt lighter, as if a heavy weight had lifted off me. From that day on, the strange dreams stopped, and my life gradually returned to normal. Eventually, I left La Lagunilla and found another job. I didn't want to be near antiques or objects with unknown histories ever again. Many people still buy things in markets like these. There are beautiful items at great prices, but be careful. If something doesn't feel right, let it go, lest you bring a curse into your home.